What's up? I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dakota.
And this is the Bourbon and Business Podcast,
where we interview successful businessmen and women to let you in on why success doesn't have a single formula to follow.
We also have a little bourbon tasting along the way, because why not?
Why not?
So guys, please enjoy this episode and let us know your thoughts at Bourbon and Business Podcast on Instagram.
Coming to you from the Bourbon and Business Studio here in the Capitol Club in downtown Jackson, Mississippi. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dakota.
And this is the Bourbon and Business Podcast. How you doing this afternoon, Dakota?
Great, Tyler. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just taking in these great views we have here at the Capitol Club.
Great views.
Yeah, beautiful views. If you are not a member of the Capitol Club, you need to go online and join today. They have
Listen out.
lunch every day, great networking opportunities, have a rooftop bar,
A parking garage.
so you don't have to get rained on to walk in here. I mean, it's one of the best places in Jackson. So if you're not a member, you need to join. And you want to introduce our guest to us?
I do. Today we have special guest, Dr. Patel, founder of Mississippi Psychiatry and Wellness. Psychiatry and Wellness.
Yeah. So we brought her here specifically today to help Dakota.
I need help. Obviously.
Well,
Dr. Patel, welcome.
yeah, glad to have you.
Thank y'all so much for having me today. I'm really excited about being on the podcast.
So sorry I couldn't pronounce psychiatry.
Well, I'm glad I didn't have to pronounce it. But we appreciate you coming on today. And what are we?
Thankfully, it's not a word I see often, so maybe that's what.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But who knows, by the end of this, you may be interested in learning more about it.
Maybe I probably need to.
Yeah. Well, what are we sipping on today, Dakota?
Today we're sipping on Tincup straight bourbon whiskey. Now, for our super fans out there, you might remember we had Tincup on before, but we did not have their bourbon. We had just their regular whiskey on. This is made with Rocky Mountain water.
Yeah, well, it tastes a lot like the other Tincup we tried, which was their, I guess, just regular whiskey. Same taste, but it has a little more of a burn to it. So I think that you'll like that. I like this one better than the other Tincup we tried. The other one was good, but I'll have to give this a 7.8.
Okay.
So pretty good. Easy to drink.
What kind of proof do you think it is?
90?
80.
80. Okay. Well, yeah, low proof.
Yeah.
So. Well, Dr. Patel, we appreciate you coming on today. We like to always start this, kind of give our listeners your background, where you're from, and then how you got to the point of founding your practice.
Oh, your practice. You're not going to try
And that was not after your mess up.
If you could diagnose Tyler, that'd be great too.
Well, Well, I appreciate you again for having me on. I'll be happy to share a little bit about my background. So I'm homegrown, as I say. So I was raised in Columbia, Mississippi, went there through high school, and then went to Mississippi College for undergrad, and then University of Mississippi School of Medicine for my medical school. And I stuck around for residency. And then after that, I thought, you know what? I think I might need to venture out. And there's something about our wonderful state of Mississippi that I thought, you know what, I'm not ready to leave yet. My time is not up yet. I think we live in a really special area. This is a really special place. And so this was something that I knew I wanted to stick around and invest back into my home. So I live now in the Jackson metro area. My office is in the Renaissance in Ridgeland, and I actually live in Flowood, so I still get to enjoy all the parts of Jackson and the suburbia. Kind of what really got me interested in starting my own private practice was the fact that I realized we don't have anything like this. And so when I went to medical school, I went in with every intention of never becoming a psychiatrist. Quite frankly, I didn't really understand it. I was very fortunate that I didn't really struggle with mental health issues myself. And so I had a really difficult time really understanding, why people would need this type of care. And so when I was rotating through, I thought I was going to be an anesthesiologist, pain management, have my own OR, and things really changed because toward the end, I realized I wasn't really happy. And I took a big risk and I had to tell my family. I had to figure out, okay, what's going to be next steps? And I have to give credit where credit is due. The director of child and adolescent psychiatry at the time, she was so special to me. And she said to me, Avni, I will support you no matter what you do, but I think you'll always find your way back to psychiatry. You have the thing that can't be taught. And she's like, I can teach evidence-based medicine. I can teach medications to anyone all day long. But to truly be an excellent and effective psychiatrist, It's just something that you're blessed with. And so I realized very early on I had a gift of communication. People tell me I had this uncanny ability to be able to get people to open up and share things with me that they've never shared with anybody else. And so I kind of took that momentum and kept going. I realized, I had plenty of mentors, and even my family didn't quite understand. They were like, so you went to medical school to do this because it's not a traditional form of medicine. But in fact, over time, I realized our physical health is important and we prioritize it so much, but what about our mental health and our mental fitness? And so if you think successful people, right, we're talking, Mark Cuban, like Jeff Bezos, like all kinds of people, if you think that those successful people aren't working with someone on their mental fitness, then I think you're sadly mistaken. And so I realized that there was a gap in care for high achievers and people who I think would otherwise never get care, because I think the movies and the media, unfortunately, have made mental health to be this very stigmatizing thing to be able to have access to. That, quote unquote, you have to be crazy or people will think you're crazy if you get mental health care. And I'll be honest, previously, before I really became educated in this, I wasn't far from that notion. And then having trained in it and realizing, okay, this is really interesting. I really enjoy human behavior. There's so many interesting things to know about humans in general, which I hope we'll get a chance to kind of delve into. There's a gap. And so my practice is a concierge psychiatry practice. And so we don't have anything like it. I'm also trained in sports psychiatry. So I'm the only sports psychiatrist in the state. And so when I was in training, I realized I was one of those more is more people. And so I did 3 leadership fellowships. I did a health equity fellowship. And then I kind of realized I was funneled all of our VIP patients when I was at the university. Mm-hmm. So I was seeing C-suite folks. I was seeing, other physicians. I was seeing clinic staff. And through that time, there was no psychiatry for high achievers, but there's sports psychiatry. Mm-hmm. And the concepts very much overlap because you're still working with this very disciplined, ambitious population with a lot to lose. And so how do you help those people? Well, they have more challenges because you're going to be working with a different set of intellect, a different set of drive, and a different kind of, these are things that I'm willing to do, these are things I'm not willing to do. And so to be able to work around it. And so that's how I came up with the idea of opening my practice. I do house visits. I have people come into the office. I offer telehealth and really an all-encompassing care because it's rare for you to be able to have direct access to your physician. So all my patients get to text me through my HIPAA-compliant platform. And so you're really working with me directly, which kind of adds another layer. And as an MD, you're kind of at the top of the food chain in the sense of you've learned the skills of everything. So I not only offer medication management, but I also offer consulting as well as therapy. So the majority of my patients that I actually see for both therapy and medication management.
Well, and I think you touched on a very important thing there.
There were a lot of important things
there. but one thing that stood out to me, you were talking about the stigma. We talk about high achievers on this podcast a lot. Whether that be, we've had special forces operators on here. We've had, professional athletes, college athletes.
Me and you.
Yep, not on the professional athlete side, but I don't know where you're going with that.
High achiever.
Yeah, and then we got business, high achievers in business. And there are a lot of people that have the ability, we see it all the time, especially in sports, you see it play out just because it's so public. You see these phenomenal athletes, but they don't make it to the professionals. And it's not because of their physical abilities. The thing that stops them, and just like in business and the special forces people, is the mental side of things. And I would go so as far to say it's probably 98% of them, and I'm just throwing a number out there, that it's because their mindset that they're unable to achieve and get to where they want to go versus it being a physical thing. Physical health is important, but I would say mental health is as or more.
Yeah. And then the flip side of that too is people who do make it but never think they do, right? And they could probably benefit from some mental health psychiatry as well, because it's this thinking that they always have like this scarcity mindset, and it's like they can't even enjoy life anymore because they're always thinking it's about to be ripped from me, it's about to be taken, and like finding out how to live that life in a balance could really be beneficial for those people too.
What does it look like? So for a high performing individual, what does it look like for them to set up and sit and talk?
Yeah, so honestly, I try to make it as easy as possible. And again, to kind of support that idea of being able to get all encompassing care without it feeling stigmatizing, I have a website, www.mspsychiatrywellness.com. You go on there on the top right hand side, click get started, you fill out a brief form, and then you get a free brief phone consultation with me. And I like doing that because I really think fit is so important. I can't tell you how many people I see who have been in mental health care for years, but they're not getting better. And yes, the business model for that is great. But for me, I say I think the best business model is that when your patients are getting better and they don't need you anymore, they're able to share that message with other people in their lives who can also get this type of care. So I can't tell you how many family members I've seen, spouses I've seen, where I started with one and then started seeing the rest. And it's been really special. And I see a variety of patients. So I see athletes, I see children, adolescents, I see physicians, business owners, people in really high levels, very stressful jobs. And that is something I don't take lightly and something I feel very privileged. And we get to touch on a number of things because people will often come in for one thing, like anxiety. And so a data point that I think is really interesting is high IQ individuals, IQ, not EQ. Mm-hmm. EQ is emotional intelligence, although you have to have some level of that to be successful because I truly think business is 90% relationships. And so part of what we get a chance to learn about, even in therapy, the 3 foundational things I always teach every single patient that walks in the door if they choose to do therapy with me is how do we control our anxiety? So how can we control our thoughts, not have our thoughts control us? How do we have appropriate boundaries? How do we have appropriate communication? Because people tend to naturally mirror and follow. And so when I do that brief phone consultation, I kind of get an idea of what's going on and say, okay, you know what, let's come in. You can walk away at any point in time. But I say, at least try to give me 3 sessions and see how you feel after. Mm-hmm. And I've yet to have a patient walk away. My no-show rate's pretty much 0%, which is awesome.
It's impressive.
So, this is something that I feel like I'm doing something special here. It's something that's really rewarding for me. I love being invested in people's lives. And not only that, but I think it allows for people to give themselves grace and be kinder to themselves. Our minds are so powerful. This is wild, right? Women can have all the physical signs and symptoms, pregnancy, and not be pregnant. That's how powerful our minds are. And we've only really been able to unlock 10% of it. And not only that, but our brains don't fully develop until we're 26 years old. So think about all the things that we can do prior to the age of 26. We can vote, we can drink, we can do all kinds of things. And higher IQ individuals tend to be more susceptible to psychiatric disorders. And not only that, but they're the most likely to self-medicate in a variety of different ways because of the fear of getting help. And so my office is in a nice area. No one will know what you're in there for. It's not branded, but I still think it's got all of the therapeutic elements that you need. And if you're someone who is just so busy and can't fathom, leaving your lifestyle or part of the workday, I can come to you. And so that's what we want. I have a portable sound machine. Everything's digital. So it's really easy to be able to get that level of care in the way that you want. And the coolest part is that there's no retainer. So I'm fee for service, which makes it easier to be able to, I think, get that level of care without that pressure of kind of having a membership like you're in a country club.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in 2025, what are we seeing, specifically around high performers? What are we seeing them struggle with on a consistent basis?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think anxiety is probably the thing that plagues people the most. So the most common mental illness worldwide is actually anxiety. The most debilitating is actually depression. And that is very common to see in the high achieving population.
Are those closely related?
They are very closely related. I often say one kind of is a nidus for the other and vice versa. But for high achievers particularly, I have noticed anxiety being the most common and being able to help get them out of that mindset. One thing I've learned and what I tell people, think about the rehab setting, right? So people are going in, you're put in a place of structure, even children, right? Mm-hmm. When you're going to school, you're being placed in structure. Humans love structure and routine. So, right, exactly. So once you're kind of out of that structure and you're left to your own devices, you can see how we can kind of create our own little world and where that can create some issues and problems. And so what I do is I help create that level of structure, but lifelong habits. And I'm trained also in integrative psychiatry and lifestyle psychiatry. So I teach a lot about those things. So it's not just about the medications. It's not just about therapy. I prescribe exercise regimens, diet routines with anxiety reducing foods, as well as even,
Wait,
what are
certain foods?
that is correct.
Very interesting.
It is. And then not only that, there's lots of superfoods that kind of incorporate it all. And then we even have naturally occurring substances in our body where if you're not getting enough, maybe we might have more anxiety. And the other concept I always like to make mention of is that high achievers and just people in general, we can be gluttonous in some ways. And the thing that gives us the highest of highs is dopamine. Okay. And there's only really about 4 to 5 things that give us dopamine. Okay. And I've always jokingly said, I'm okay being content with my happy levels of serotonin. And when I'm blessed with my dopamine hits, I'll take them. I won't go chasing after them, but I'll take them. And that's where people fall short. And I think where some of these mental health issues come in with high achievers. Think about an athlete. You have now been offered all this money. And I even think about the more metropolitan areas of New York as I'm just observing people. The things that give us the dopamine hit, the thing that hits the highs of highs and breaks the glass ceiling are drugs. The second is sex. Then it's power, money, ego. They all kind of go together. And the final one is food. So it's lower on the totem pole, but you can kind of see where people cope with food, right? Because all of those things give us a dopamine hit and people become gluttonous for it. And when you do, you need more is more is more. And what can happen is
the law of diminishing return, right?
That's right. That's right. And so that's where I find high achievers and athletes and whatnot fall short. And the people who do make it in terms of what they feel their perception of success is and continue it, understand that level of concept and understand the level of discipline, structure, and routine that's required to continue achieving that.
This is fascinating. And I have a question that I just thought of. It's not in the script, so I'm going to hit you with it. And you can tell me if that's a dumb question or not.
Never a dumb question.
I don't think I'd be on the high IQ side of things because I can't pronounce psychiatry. But what do you think is the rate of like natural anxiety, like predisposed? It's like genetic, like you've got grandparents, great grandparents, great great grandparents. Like everyone has just seemed to struggle with this anxiety issue versus gained through circumstances.
Sure.
Like in life, reverse nurture, if you will.
That's a perfect question, and that's a great question, very insightful one actually. So
higher than I thought, Tyler.
That's right. So it's actually very natural for us to have anxiety, and we need to. Otherwise, our fight or flight would be so off, right? We wouldn't be able to sense danger. Okay, so anxiety is healthy, and you need to have that. So you care enough to study, you care enough about showing up at your job, you care enough about all of those things. However, what I've noticed in psychiatry and mental health in general, there's a huge genetic component. And not only that, but people don't realize how much love and nurture is required in children. I think about me and my siblings. So I have a younger sister. She's a plastic surgeon. I have a younger brother. He's in internal medicine and still in training, who knows what he'll do next. But it's funny. We all share the same DNA, yet we're wildly different, right? We're wildly different in how we handle situations. But so much of that, again, is genetic love and nurture. I may have required more love and nurture than my brother or than my sister. You just never really know, and you can't predict that. But to make sure you have enough time invested, I think is so important. And trauma is the other big piece that plays a huge role, even in anxiety, depression, etc. We all experience trauma, and trauma, what may be a trauma to me may not be to you, and vice versa. But trauma plays a huge role in the way we make our decisions, whether it's achieving success or maybe other decisions that we've made that have held us back from success. And not only that, but I find in high achievers in general, sometimes people say you got to make choices. And what I've noticed is that if people have just found the most success professionally, their personal life may suffer. Or if they found the most success personally, they feel like their professional life has suffered. I don't think you necessarily have to make choices, and I don't necessarily think there's a perfect balance, but I think there's an integration of what balance looks like to you, and that's going to be individual. And so I work really hard trying to understand with people, what makes sense. And so one of the cool things that I work with professionals about, which is funny because it's a bit of a taboo topic. It's something, I went to a private Baptist school, right? And so intimacy is another big piece that I actually ask a lot of people about, because guess what? When you're not able to have your intimacy needs met, and I don't just mean physically, then what I found is a lot of people are anxious. It can affect their professional life in a lot of ways.
Like feeling safe, feeling what are the 7 desires of every human heart? Is that right?
Yeah. For men and women.
Yeah.
It's not just, but there are some biological differences that I always like to say. No matter what your orientation is, there's some biological differences that exist. And I'll kind of explain that because that's an evolutionary theory. So for example, men, what I have found, think in risk, benefit, return on investment. Y'all are wired that way. You have to be.
And Tyler's smiling because that makes total sense. Like, that's how I deal with every problem I face.
Right. Because here's the thing, you are naturally meant to solve problems. You would not survive, right? You wouldn't be the fittest if you weren't able to.
Right.
Okay. Women tend to be more emotional and resilient for two reasons. Well, you have to be more emotional and loving and caring. Otherwise, I joke, all of our kids would end up serial killers are in jail.
That's probably so true.
Right?
Yeah.
But not only that, they have to be resilient in the sense of if something happened to their partner, to their significant other, how would you survive from an evolutionary standpoint? You have to be able to move on. And so it's really interesting because I teach people those concepts and I'm like, so, okay, let's take it back to your relationship and your communication. You know, and I like using some measures. I mean, although the validity to it is questionable, I will use love languages, etc., to kind of get an idea of what people are comfortable with. And it opens the door for trauma and all kinds of things. And another trick I like to use, I've learned from like CIA, FBI, true communication experts, not just, you know, I learned from other psychiatrists, but I like learning from these experts more on how do I get my patients to be more comfortable? Because the challenge with high achievers is they're going to withhold a lot more.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
Right.
There's so much more to lose. Yeah.
Right. So one of the ways that I do it is exactly. So if you ask a question, our brain automatically processes that as a potential threat. So we are much more guarded in our response. But if I ask something in a statement form, our brain processes it differently. So people are willing to give more. So what I do is I often start with questions because that's what people expect, right? But then I start weaving into asking in statement forms, and it's like the floodgates.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, so I want to spend some time with like social media and phones. What type of negative impact is that having on specifically our high achievers or just people in general?
Gosh, yeah, the instant gratification, dopamine, serotonin, all the different brain drugs, right?
Yes, perfect. So I wrote an entire book chapter on it, the pros and cons.
You can go get it
on how social media affects adolescent mental health, but not just adolescents. This is across the board. So we have, again, as I said, our formative years are up until 26. That means our brain, it's kind of like landscape in a bush, right? There's a lot of pruning that's going on. It's growing, you're cutting it back, you're trying to shape it just perfectly, get all the right angles. And so much of that is shaped by our life experiences as well as the genetic component, right? There are some things we're just genetically loaded for, but then what life experiences you have, how you decide to take care of that really shapes it moving forward.
Right.
So social media, I say it's a double-edged sword, right? There's something about it where you have access to more information now than ever before. And in fact, the data shows, you know, our Gen Zers are getting all of their news from social media. I mean, the idea of print is a foreign concept. And so what's interesting is we now have access to all of this information. We have access to be able to create businesses and to be able to become successful in that way and share information. Really concerning is what is happening to our social skills, our ability to be present with one another, our ability for vulnerability, as well as what this does from a depression, anxiety standpoint, this pressure of an image that we now have to curate. And so one of the things that I've always said is having, again, everything in moderation is really helpful. So I do the same thing. I have phone breaks. On the weekends, I'm hardly on my phone. I keep a watch on just in case I get a phone call or a text message, but I'm rarely on my phone over the weekends. During the week, my work requires me to be, but I still have set times for that because what you're doing is every time you're on social media, and this is funny, I actually met an individual, brilliant. I mean, full package, you know, good looking, successful, all of the things, and is looking for a life partner. And I realized, you know, he said he's using the dating apps, he's always on social media. And so I just looked at his social media just to gauge and get an idea. You know, I realized, I told him, I said, I think you're addicted to the dopamine hits that you get. It's not the actual interaction you're looking for. It's that high that you feel when you get a match or someone follows you or you're following someone else. And so people have now created this own little dream world, which I think can be quite scary instead of actually connecting with one another. And I think that also helps people run further and further away from having to be vulnerable and create genuine connection because you can kind of create those parameters that you have a whole other world you can do it in. right? And it feels like you're able to get away with more.
I just thought of this too. It's instant gratification, but it's not an instant negative effect, right? And so you like trick yourself, and then all of a sudden you're too far down the road, and then you look up and you look back and you're like, oh, dang, I made a mistake. I should not have gone this way, but now I can't. I can't
Yeah.
go back.
And I think it sets an unrealistic standard. So right now, for example, porn addiction's at an all-time high. Suicide rates are at an all-time high. Suicide ideation, anxiety, depression. It's only getting worse. And part of me has wondered, we have some data, but there's always confounding factors. I think social media has played a role in that, but I also think it's created a lot of community. I mean, I've met some incredible physicians who I'm now friends with that I met on social media who live in other places, and we would have never been able to connect if it weren't for that. So I think it can create a lot of connections, but again, everything in moderation. And you're right, there's that instant gratification piece, but then what are the long-term effects of it if you're not paying attention to your use? So I say mindful use is really important. And with that, I actually created a brief screener. So if I have patients coming in, including their children, that they're worried about, I don't know if I'm using social media safely, we can use the screener and we've got a whole treatment plan. So I actually teach other clinicians how to treat people with maybe problematic social media or internet use.
Yeah, fantastic. And even not on the social media side of things, I see a lot of the time, especially now, like with my work, never truly detaching. Like, even like, for instance, I went to a buddy's wedding this past week and flew out on Thursday. Whole time I'm in the airport working on my computer, doing whatever. And then I look up and I'm in New Jersey. And it's like, I don't even know how I got here. Like, I missed all of, like, take for granted being able to just sit in the airport and, examine people and just take it in. And I think a lot of times, you start experiencing burnout and things like that because you're not taking those times to just actually walk outside and just look at the air, look at the sky. It's always just work, or then social media effect.
Have you heard of grounding?
No.
So have you heard? I'm sure you probably heard.
I sure have. It's part of what I teach.
I was going to ask, do you suggest it or not? So it's like this idea that you go barefoot outside in the grass, like actual earth, ground, dirt, grass, life, and you're looking at trees in the sky to just bring yourself back to center of like, okay, I don't need this by my side every waking second. Like, I can exist outside of technology and the hustle and bustle of everyday life.
Yeah, part of what I recommend is, if you find yourself being one of those people, right? Airports are a good time, to be fair, right? To be able to get work done and whatnot. Because when you're at home, you want to be present with your family, right? Or when you're in a location, you're going to have to be present with people. So I say, don't fault yourself for that. However, this is something I always talk about with friends in more metropolitan areas. They're like, you live in Mississippi. Explain that to me. And I said, I love the green. I love being able to get in my car and not have to drive 80 miles an hour to get somewhere. I like just being able to stop and smell the roses, and I think that's okay. And so people ask me all the time, particularly when I visit metropolitan areas, why are you so happy? And I think you have to be able to choose yourself. I think one of the bravest things you can ever do, including if you're a parent or a spouse or whatever, is learning how to choose yourself. And so doing that, grounding, but also using grounding techniques, right? Like when you feel moments of anxiety. And then the other thing that I say is, when you wake up first thing in the morning or before you go to bed, I have a very strict rule about 30 minutes to an hour before bed, phone's gotta go. And then when you wake up first thing in the morning, first hour should be for yourself. You don't need to be looking on the phone, even if it means waking up a little bit earlier and going to bed a little bit earlier so you can have that time. And so that way you don't feel like you're always connected. I think that can be really helpful.
Yeah, and I think one issue, talking with a lot of founders that we have on here, we see them run into, you being that high achieving person, you think you can take on more. So there's another task, it's like, yeah, I got it. I can handle it. This is a simple task. Why it may be a simple task, it's still taking your time. And I think a lot of times, especially, how connected we've become, we actually don't plan our time out wisely. And we take on way more than we actually should. Do you see that a lot?
I do.
With your people that you're working with?
Absolutely. I think there's this idea of if I don't achieve X, Y, and Z, or if my goals don't continue to expand, or right, if I'm not one-upping myself, then I'm not enough. I'll have failed.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I help
And it's like, we
reframe.
told you that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But we did. We inherently tell ourselves that because, again, to achieve the next level of dopamine hit, that's what we need to do.
Gotta have more. Yeah.
Right. And so I help people reframe by actually sitting down and being honest with ourselves. That's the hardest thing for people to do, is to be honest with themselves. And so one of the ways, I used to scoff at it, but I say journaling, and just get comfortable. Stream of thought consciousness doesn't have to make sense. Just start getting words on paper. There's something
Today I
about
saw a cloud. It was
Right.
white.
There-
Another cloud. It was gray. I think it might rain.
That's right. But I think to be able to see something tangibly
Mhm.
on paper helps take all of those thoughts that you're having to deal with because you're running 100 miles an hour. This is usually how high achievers function. And then when you're on a flight, right, you can sit there and kind of take a look and be like, And then you start learning how to prioritize naturally. What I'm doing is I'm helping your brain alter the way that it thinks in its pattern recognition, right? So we're trying to change
Because we're lazy inherently.
behavior.
People, right?
I can argue for or against, but I think in this,
What I mean by that is we choose the most efficient path. Is
Yes.
what we see fit. So it's like, if this has
Least
worked
resistance.
in the past, I'm gonna do it again. And that's why it's so hard to be like, once you start getting up later in the day, to go back to waking up 30 minutes earlier than you were, because you're like, well, I got to work on time and I still got all my work done. So it's like, oh, now I can afford that extra 30 minutes that I thought I couldn't. But maybe you actually need that extra 30 minutes to journal or something.
exactly. And I always say I'm kind of the master disruptor and accountability partner, right?
I like that.
Part of what you're doing with me is I'm here to kind of disrupt your life because there's something about it that's not working, right? And then I'm here to keep you accountable because if you know you have to come see me,
Mhm.
if you know you've got goals you want to reach, you're more likely to do so. And that's high achievers are wired that way.
Yeah.
Right. And so let's take an athlete, for example, and let's just take a case because I always like to kind of use these as examples. And then we'll take another evolutionary concept. So baseball players, all kinds of athletes, right? It's common to get the yips.
Mhm.
And so there's definitely different treatment methods and ways to be able to kind of get around that are very evidence-based. But one of the things that I always like to teach about that I always find is so interesting. Have you ever noticed that when you look at a dugout, it's like full of tobacco? It's just full of dip.
Mhm.
And you're just like, I'm trying to understand. And then when you think about it, the gateway drug for many people, for example, are cigarettes. I'd say for our parents' generation, now probably marijuana, vaping, right? We see it's pretty rampant. What is that and why is that? So think about it. When we were babies, what's the thing that gave us the most comfort?
Nursing, probably.
Nursing. It's
Yeah.
our food source and it soothed us because it made us feel safe. So what people do is they're oral soothing. They're trying to recreate that mouthfeel. And then whatever substance you're using is meant to be addictive. So that's a piece. So that's kind of how I help high achievers, how I help athletes help relate. When you can make that subconscious connection for someone conscious, they're more likely to be able to get to a place of either remission or achieving their goal. So that's part of what I do is I definitely feel gifted in that way of being able to see things from that perspective and read a situation pretty well. And same thing with the level of emotional intelligence. So I'm able to kind of notice these gaps and say, okay, how can I teach you? Because truly, high achievers are lifelong learners.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how they reach the next goal. They know that it's not enough, but where do I help them find the balance and integration that makes sense for them and for them to be able to help reach their goals?
To keep them healthy. Yeah.
Mhm.
Some great info there. We could probably talk for
I could literally talk about this for another 3 hours.
yeah.
This is fascinating.
Great information here. Dakota, give us your thoughts on the bourbon.
Thoughts on the bourbon? 10-cup straight bourbon whiskey. Too smooth. Not enough flavor for me. Maybe that's the Rocky Mountain water. It's an easy drinker though. So if you're looking for an intro to bourbon, I would highly suggest this. It's like $20-$30, so it's not going to break the bank. And it's a super easy drinker for bourbon. But it just wasn't for me. My palate, not a fan. I'm going to go 7.0.
7.8. So we will land at a 7.4. How do you like that?
That's not good at all. Did you try?
And on the if we had someone listening today and they say, "Hey, I liked what you were talking about. I want to talk more about, sitting down with you, learning more about what you do," how do they get in contact with you?
Easy peasy. You can either go to my website at www.mspsychiatrywellness.com. We have Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook as well, or you can contact my practice number at 601-509-2015.
Perfect. And to our listeners, however you stream this podcast, if you will give us a rating and follow us on social media, just don't stay on it too long. And we'll see you next week.
Hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
If you have any feedback or would like to be featured, reach out to us at bourbonandbusinesspodcast@gmail.com.
Or find us on Instagram at Bourbon and Business Podcast.
Thanks again for listening.
Follow us for more content and info on the next episode.